Welcome, divas and dudes, to our nutrition class. This is part 2 of You Can't Run Out Your Fork. And so just a little play on words there, but really what I hope to accomplish is today to continue answering some questions kind of around fact or fiction. And I want to just do a quick review of what we talked about last time so we can get up to speed. And I'm hoping that we'll have a good discussion around the activities that you enjoy doing and really how to get the most out of our calorie balance equation and the things that you do, and really how do we maximize your wellness with your fitness, and then how do we fuel that fitness with the very best nutrition. So last time we talked about the calorie balance equation. We talked about how many calories does it take to gain 1 pound, or the flip side, to lose 1 pound. And we talked a little bit about the intensity and time equation. And if our typical workout is something like 45 minutes to an hour, how hard do we have to work out in order to get what we think is that, correct calorie burn? And what I tried to help you see is that when you think of perceived exertion, or RPE, that stands for rate of perceived exertion, that's going to have a lot to do with, of course, how many calories we burn. And then today I'm going to talk with you about how that has to do with what fuel your body uses during the workout. And so hold on to that thought as we go through the next little just reminder pages. We know that when we get our heart rate up, what responses does our body give us? Well, of course, we're going to increase our sweat, increase breathing, and muscle fatigue. And these symptoms are good, and it definitely has a bearing on how hard our workout is, right? So we're going to have more and more muscle fatigue when our exercise is harder. So we all understand that clearly. And what we're going to talk about today a little bit is when we work out hard, does that mean that we have to hurry up and eat some more protein in order to rebuild that muscle that we broke down? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So I also talked about if we exercise something like an hour a day, how does that add up to our whole day? And how important is those calories that we burned in that exercise bout in comparison to the rest of the day? And so the point I want you to see is that our basal metabolic rate has so many more calories. So how much it takes our body just to stay alive is a lot more calories than that small amount that we're going to burn in that typical exercise bout. Even if we're doing a moderate walk or a high intensity workout, the total calories is pretty small in comparison. We think of how many hours we sleep, and of course we know that that has a big bearing on our wellness, sleep. So if we were to give up our sleep time to get more exercise time, of course that's diminishing returns of health. We don't want to do that. So 8 to 10 hours is really important. The rest of the time that we are active during our day, we actually are burning more fat as a percentage of our calories than we're burning anything else. And so I gave the silly scenario that, wow, if that were true, maybe we should just sit on the couch, not do anything, because we're burning the most percentage of fat. And I love that Denise chuckled. Why is that a bad idea? Lots of reasons, right? For sure, we will lose muscle mass, we will lose bone density, we won't have a stitch of fun, we won't get to have any socialization, and of course, when we don't use our bodies, now the whole physiology and ultimately that basal metabolic rate does what? It declines. If you don't use it, you lose it, which we know is really true. So when we think of how many calories takes a pound, if we start to not be active, then we know that it's going to be even easier because our basal metabolic rate goes down, meaning that we need even less calories to stay alive. And so again, that calorie balance equation helps us understand that calories in, if they're greater than calories out, our body's going to have extra storage, right? That's a good math problem, but we know that doesn't always happen that way. It feels like I'm doing all this work and I'm really cutting my calories and I'm not getting to my goal. And so that's where I want us to talk about and understand how sometimes this simple math can get really muddy. One example I like to give is the 1,000-calorie diet. And if somebody were to follow 1,000 calories and their basal metabolic rate said they needed 1,500 calories, so that's already a deficit, so I can just sit on the couch and know that the pounds are going to melt off, right? And what we know is that the body's really clever, and the body learns how to adjust, which I just mentioned, that basal metabolic rate can decline a little bit, but also the meal timing, the timing of when we eat has a big bearing on what happens to our body storage of energy. So if we were to eat 1,000 calories all at 4 o'clock, we're going to do the modified fast and we're not going to eat anything all day, and then we're going to eat a really big meal at 4 o'clock. Even though we're following a low-calorie diet, but we eat it all at once, what do you think will happen to our body's storage mechanisms? Body goes, oh, yay, here comes calories. I'm going to store them all. And so what does that do to the fat cells? Opens up the fat cell, says, come on in, I'm going to store it for later. And that's, of course, not what we want. So even if we follow a low-calorie diet, but we eat too large of a meal all at once, that will help promote exactly what we don't want, which is the basal metabolic rate goes down because we're not doing much and we're taking long breaks in between eating, and then we eat a large amount of calories, and then it turns on our insulin. And you guys know, bless you, you know that if I've talked about anything, I've talked about how insulin is dangerous. Insulin is dangerous because it can gradually creep up depending on what kinds of foods we eat, and anytime it's up, our fat storage capability is also turned up. So we don't like insulin. So as we kind of go through this whole process, staying active is really the key. We know that activities like walking and swimming are aerobic, and that just means that we're exercising our heart and lungs in addition to the muscles. And so we know that using the body as a whole is really important. We want to be able to use muscles and heart and lungs in order to get the circulatory system to change in a healthier way. So if we just do strength training, it'll be little bouts of increased breathing, but it's not an endurance environment. It's more of a strength. So anaerobic means not with air, and strength training can sometimes be that way. Now, for a lot of us, it's still going to be aerobic. So I don't want to think about this too much, except that walking and anything that is moving our bodies is going to be a very effective way to help us breathe more. And as we take in more oxygen and dispel more CO2, we are burning energy, and that's what we love. So we also know that the style of exercise can really change as we go through our life stages. In our maybe teens and 20s, we could run around all day and have still lots of energy and no muscle aches and pains. And what we found is folks that are older have a little more reason to say, I don't feel like going out today, right? So if we feel like in order to be successful, we have to go to a gym, we have to walk or jog for 45 minutes, and if we don't do that, we'll just forget it. I'm going to stay home because I can't do that. So really what I want us to know is the rules and regulations around what is correct for exercise is really crumbling. We are changing that paradigm so much. Not only is the styles of exercise changed throughout the years, the amount and the intensity are really starting to look different. Not only for the time phase of where we are in our lifespan and, of course, our current health So if you're going through treatment of a condition, we still want to be active, but we want to do something that is reasonable, something that's just going to get your heart rate up, get your endorphins up, and it might be 10 or 15 minutes of doing a little something that you enjoy, rather than going to a gym and feeling like you have to go through a rigorous plan. And so the rules and regulations say that being active can take a lot of different styles, and absolutely it's critical to listen to your body cues so that you can continue doing something that's part of the movement paradigm. So a little bit more about the wellness paradigm as we've finished through this. We know that exercise gives us an opportunity to have social connection, right? And so when we think of, gosh, COVID for the last couple years, it's been really tough because people have felt that they can't be together. And so the social connection and even the intellectual and just being out in the sun has really taken a toll on people. And so now we're really trying to switch that around, and being outside and being active is helpful, but also just the social connectiveness is really critical for our wellness paradigm. Okay, so now as we turn the tides and look a little bit more, let's close the chapter from the last one. And what fact or fiction questions did we get to answer? Anybody want to give me the first one from the last class? What was the first fact or fiction question from our last class?
On the 18th?
Uh-huh.
The harder you exercise, the more fat you'll burn.
Okay, so the harder you exercise, the more fat you will burn. Is that fact or fiction? Yeah, exactly. Now this one is for this week. What about the one from last week?
If you want to lose weight, you need to exercise more.
Yes, exactly. So that's the one we just tried to say, nope, that's not true. Exercising more is not the key. And that's because we know that the time and intensity equation does not give us a clean and simple picture. We know that there's a lot more involved in it. The little bit that we exercise is not going to make or break our successful weight loss. What's the next one, Mary?
The more you exercise, the healthier you are.
Right. So we know that you can over-exercise. We know that, especially in the different life stages we are in, you can get the best exercise based on strength and flexibility and endurance training, and it can be as little as 15 minutes. You can have some benefit even from 1 day a week, which, years ago we used to say, don't even bother if you can't do it 3 times a week for 45 minutes. Okay? So now I want to take it to the next couple of questions on fact or fiction. The harder you exercise, the more fat you will burn. And so hard exercise, let's look at what that means and what fuel do we use when we exercise. So hard exercise and fuel. So let's just kind of play around with this. What do you think? If I am fairly well trained, I exercise a couple of times a week, and I go out and I push harder than I normally do. Do you think my fuel is going to change with hard exercise? Is the fuel going to change from normal? Any ideas?
What are you asking? Like, do you need more food?
Yeah, exactly. So if we're trying to think of, I'm going to change my workout, what would I do differently to accommodate my increase in intensity and time? So sometimes people will think, well, yeah, if I work hard, what type of fuel is my body going to use? Well, we know that there's 2 fuels primarily, blood sugar and fat. And so the question is, if you start working out hard compared to what you're used to, do you start using a different fuel? I alluded to this on our last class, and it had to do with your breathing in and your breathing out. So your respiratory quotient is how much oxygen and CO2 your body's using. So when you start working out really hard, you end up using more blood sugar. Because remember I said, gosh, if you're just sitting on a couch, what are you primarily burning? So sitting on a couch is very easy. Easy. So we have lots of ability to burn the most readily available fuel. So if we're walking and we're strolling, it's easy, 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 our body has enough time to burn this fuel. This fuel fat has a lot of nutrients in it. It's loaded with energy. If you've ever heard of the 7 calories per gram for fat, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. 9 calories per gram for fat. And over here on sugar, 7 calories per gram. Which one is higher? 9 calories per gram or 7? Of course. But it takes a lot of oxygen to be able to burn those fat molecules in our machine, our body. So whenever we're thinking of time and intensity, if we're working out easy, there's plenty of time to bring in oxygen and burn all those fat calories for fuel. If we're working really hard, meaning we're breathing hard, now we don't have the time, so our body goes to a simple energy source, which is sugar. And so if we are trying to burn body fat and we start working harder and harder, I'm going to push hard on the bike, I'm going to run, I'm going to do circuit weights, I'm going to push hard, hard, hard. The harder I breathe, the more I don't burn fat. That's the amazing message. Just calories. And I love how you said that, because whatever calories your body can get the fastest. And so our blood sugar is the fastest resource for the energy. So our blood sugar will go down when we exercise so much harder than our body's used to. It doesn't have enough time to burn this fuel, so we end up burning blood sugar. And what do you think happens when our blood sugar goes down? Yeah, a lot of things. So
A lot of times you can control like low-level diabetes or pre-diabetes.
yes. So sometimes it's a good thing. If you were a diabetic and you had a big meal, or even if you're not, and you had a big meal and you wanted to go burn off some of the calories in your blood, I guess you could do a little bit more exercise. Now, here's where it gets a little complicated. If you've just eaten a big meal, where do you think all your blood is? Exactly. So it's not going to be the best time to go run up a mountain, because your muscles and your legs are going to go, holy cow, I have no blood. And you're going to get cramps and you'll feel terrible. But the idea that Mary brought up is a good one, that sugar is in the bloodstream. And so when we're a diabetic and we consistently have sugars that are a little bit too high, of course, exercising will make that blood go from the bloodstream into the muscles. And so that's the way our bodies are meant to do. I mean, it's a very important system that we have readily available energy in our bloodstream that our muscles can pull out and form the anaerobic activity to make the muscles work. So that's a great thing, especially if we tend to have high sugars, right? The only time that it starts to be a problem is if you have some other bad symptoms. So if you're overworking, what else might happen? So you're working hard, like I mentioned on that past page. You're overworking. We know that your sugar is going to be used. So sugar is fuel. Of course, we might get an injury, right? which is never good because then you have to stop your exercise for a while, and that's terrible. The other thing that happens is when we push really hard, something changes in our hormones too. Our appetite goes up. Do you ever notice this when you have started a new exercise program, and maybe the first day you don't notice it, but maybe the second or third day of the week, you're starting to notice, man, I'm a lot more hungry. There's an amazing cascade of changes that happens in our hormone system, so ghrelin and neuropeptide Y, and of course glucagon and insulin, that say, whoa, she's doing a lot more stuff, so I'm going to make sure she gets hungry and eats more, because I don't like it when that blood sugar starts to go down lower than what I'm used to, right? And the muscles say, hey, look, I need it. She's asking me to do a whole lot of stuff, and I don't have time to get fat from my fat stores, so I'm going to burn whatever I can. Now we've got the liver over here. That's another really cool element. And this is gluconeogenesis. What does that word mean, do you think?
No time.
Well, we're going to break it down. Gluco is short for glucose. Neo, what do you think that stands for? Yes, exactly. So the genesis, so new, glucose. So the liver is so cool. The liver can take any nutrient, whether it be amino acids, fatty acids, and make new sugars. So again, whenever we're active, even when we're sitting here right now, do you think we're burning all of one fuel type? Amino acids, essential fatty acids, and glucose. Those are, remember, the types of nutrients. Let's back up a little more from this. What 3 macronutrients do we have to pick from? We can have a protein, a carbohydrate, or a fat. Those are every single food that we eat has to fall into that category. When our body breaks down protein, carbohydrates, and fats, these are the big molecules. They get broken down into these. Again, our liver is amazing because it does all this work. So when our body is getting low on sugar, even during the night when we're sleeping, gluconeogenesis is happening. And so it's a very effective way for our bodies to do just fine for many hours, gosh, even a day, right? To not need to eat more sugar and have our blood sugar stay stable. So that's the part I love, is that the liver is so good at this. And even during prolonged endurance exercise, your liver can start making a little bit more. And so if you ever did a long hike, or I used to do hour-long bike rides, we used to do the MS 150 and be out for 10 hours. Of course, my blood sugar ran out. And so the good news is there's lots happening in our physiology to make sure that we have enough energy. And one of them is that the liver can start kicking out new glucose. So that's the part I love, is that the liver is a secondary benefit. When the sugar starts getting low, the liver says, no problem, I got it. I'm going to make some more for us. Does that mean that the fat stores still don't get touched because now the liver is doing all the work? It depends. It depends on how hard you're breathing. And so again, the intensity of the exercise is going to have a big bearing on what kind of fuel the body is able to use in the exercise. And so, even back in the 80s and 90s, when I was doing a lot of teaching and of fitness classes, we used to find that people would do really well just on walking programs. And of course, then you have the athletes. If they start a walking program, what's going to happen to their fitness level? It's going to go down because now that's less than what they're used to. So when people say, well, Suzanne, should I just walk for the rest of my, fitness endeavors? And I'll say, well, it depends. What's your goal? Where are you in your lifespan as far as muscle aches and pains, potential joint aches and pains? So no, we cannot stay in one kind of exercise forever. We want to be able to gradually go up, as long as it's not in this category, too hard. Hard breathing, muscle aches, starting to really get hungry, feeling like, gosh, I can't get off the couch. Those are body cues that, gosh, maybe you did this and you caused the sugar in your bloodstream to go down too much that even the liver couldn't keep up. So really the sweet spot is finding where is it in my breathing ability that makes it just right. Just right. And so back on this page, when I talked about this oxygen, how much you take in and how much CO2 you exhale, is a number that we exercise physiologists use, and it's called respiratory quotient. Don't worry about that too much, but what's important, I think, is that if you ever wear a little heart rate monitor or you go to a gym and somebody helps you understand more about your RQ, you're going to find something that's called your training zone. What do you think I mean by that? You want to guess? No, I won't put you on the spot. Training zone is where your body has this in a sweet spot. So how much can you breathe? How high can your heart rate go before it's hard and your fuel exchange differs? So let me explain that a little bit more. So if we think of your training, what I call your sweet spot, this is where at a certain heart rate, where you can go up in your heart rate just to the point where you're burning the most total calories without flipping over and doing all blood sugar. So it's a heart rate zone where you burn the most calories that you can and still have fat in the equation. That's a number we like. So it's a heart rate zone where you burn the most calories you can. So I'm on my treadmill and I've got a heart rate of 150. And I learned that 150 is where my sweet spot is, and that helps me to know how many calories I can burn on this exercise that still is going to have fat as a good percentage of that calories. Because if I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to go out and walk, I don't want to over-exercise and cause blood sugar to be really pulled out of my bloodstream too fast, but I want to get all the benefit I can. Now, not everybody's going to go figure out the training zone, right? It's like, Suzanne, that sounds all great and all, but how do I know where my sweet spot is? And that's a great question, because before I got my master's in exercise physiology, I was trying to figure out this even for my exercise students. And so we've come up with, the exercise physiologists of the world have come up with a perceived exertion, which you heard from my last talk, rate of perceived exertion, RPE. So now we're going to put our science caps on and go, okay, what the heck does she mean? And I'm going to say, as scientists, we can look at lots of information, a lot of body of evidence, and say that we tested hundreds and hundreds of people that had a heart rate monitor on, had an O2 mask on, and the scientists could be watching where their heart rate is and their oxygen exchange, their RQ, and the person would tell us, how hard do you feel like you're working? And the person would give a number. And so when we have an RPE scale, and there's lots of different scales, but we can just say 1 to 15. So it's a scale, And again, it's very subjective, but we have found that even though it is very subjective, people are so similar in how they rate how hard they feel like they're working, how much they're having to breathe, and it correlates so well with how their body is using fuel. So if I give myself 14, is that easy or hard? I would call that hard, kind of the scale of easy to hard. So again, subjective. And 14 means, holy moly, I don't think I can keep this up. This is hard. This is going to be something like so high that my heart rate is burning all sugars. Sugar burn. Too high. High risk of injury, high risk of fatigue, high risk of getting super hungry and uncomfortable, and I'm not burning any fat. And that's not what we want. We want to be able to have our bodies train so that we can burn more fat at a higher heart rate. So you think if I've been exercising regularly for 2 years, I can burn fat at a higher number? Yeah. So even though my blood sugar burn doesn't happen so at such a high number, I can keep the fat burn going. So fat burn is always the goal. And as I get more trained, my perceived exertion also goes down, right? And so I might be doing the same exact activity that I did a year ago. And now this year, my machine has gotten stronger and I've gotten more able to pull oxygen in and burn the fat cells or the fat molecules. So now the same exercise might be, instead of a 14, it might be a 10. So that correlates with more fat burn. So again, numbers are all subjective, but when you go from one person and you measure them and understand how they rate these numbers, we see an amazing similarity between people. So give me some examples. Have you ever done one of the diva dance classes and you feel like the fun and the music you kind of get caught up in it and you are exercising so hard, but you're just having so much fun? Who cares if I'm burning sugar? Have you ever gotten to that point? I hope you have. That means you're enjoying your activity. And so a little bit of that is okay. I don't want us to be, apprehensive to sometimes work hard, an RPE of, hard. It's way past my sweet spot. And long ago, when I first started teaching aerobics when I was 18, we used to use this example that if you could say 5 words in a row, you were not working so hard that your RPE went out of whack. Has anybody heard of that before? I see some heads nodding. No? If you could say a few words in a row, or if you could talk to your neighbor, you were probably okay before you had to take a breath. Right? So even in the 80s, we knew that this was really important. We just didn't know how to really equate it. And then, of course, the respiratory quotient and the RQ value becomes now part of the algorithms that we put into these watches. So unless you've actually done a test, the guesstimate here is based on our age. They're going to guesstimate that, okay, a woman of 56, she probably is going to start burning all blood sugar at a heart rate of 160. And, we have all these, again, algorithms that we use. So we don't have to learn all those, because really what I always teach my clients now is go with how you feel. Now, when I used to do the tests of people when they were on the treadmill and I had them hooked up to oxygen and heart rate and all that, and I was watching them, you could almost exactly see when you surpass this. And we call it the jaw drop. When you're exercising and all of a sudden you have to start breathing hard. Stop talking to me, neighbor. I got to breathe. That's where you are probably just over that hump. of your sweet spot? Questions? It's kind of interesting, right? When I used to work in a cardiac rehab unit, and we had people on treadmills that, were rehabbing from surgery. I mean, it was people that were already in a high risk because, they're just recovering. Their RPE was really sensitive. Even just a little bit of heart rate stress would cause them to feel that. And it actually is true in their body. They were feeling this blood sugar burn because they were already under stress. So again, it depends on where you are in your life. Recovering from treatments, having stressful, because your family's in town and it's the holidays and, you're just already stressed. Your heart rate definitely has a change based on stress level. So there'll be some days when you're in an exercise class and you feel fantastic and you worked out a lot harder than you normally did, and probably your fuel stayed in a fat burning phase. So to me, that's kind of cool too, that there's other factors that have an impact on it, not just our fitness level per se. Okay? Questions about this? So we've learned a little bit about the perceived exertion and how that has a direct impact on the type of fuel we burn. We know that if we stay in the sweet spot, we're getting the most calories, because of course, sitting on the couch, how many calories do we burn? Not many. When we're out walking and we find a good hill and we're burning more calories, but there's a risk that if we push too hard, we're going to ask our bodies to go into all sugar burn. And then we have a diminishing returns because our body can only do that so long before the liver has to kick in and make some new sugars, gluconeogenesis. And we do really want to burn fat because that's going to help us overall in our health. So you're right in your answer of the question, is the fact or fiction? Let's go back to that question. It's an important one, and now we can kind of see why. The harder you exercise, the more fat you will burn. Now we can unequivocally say that that is fiction. The consistency of exercise is more important than the intensity. That is a powerful thing to say. Consistency is more important than intensity. Even if you did just walk 45 minutes every day, you are going to ramp up the ability of your heart to be strong and pump blood, the ability of your lungs to bring in oxygen and exchange the oxygen gases with your tissues. You're going to build your muscles and your bones and your ligaments and tendons really well. Yes, you're going to get to a plateau, but we might be okay with that plateau, We might not want to go harder. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Okay, next one. When you exercise, you need to eat protein soon afterwards to build muscle. What do you think? Soon afterward. Has anybody been to a gym? Yes. And what do they tell you to do right after your workout? Go get your protein shake. Hurry. And so you probably have figured out by now that all of the little things up here I'm always going to say are not this, but they're this. And so then you're going to say, okay, tell me about why. Even when we do research, we have found that when somebody finishes their exercise, now that I've just told you about what fuel gets used, do you think protein has been a fuel now that we need to hurry up and replace? I'm so glad to see heads shaking. We've talked about fat, we've talked about sugar, we've even talked about gluconeogenesis, and yes, your liver could make some new sugar out of protein, but it's going to take some time, and you know what? We don't have that time. No, amino acids are going to be more valuable later in the day. The first thing our body wants to do right after exercise is hydrate. So now let's go back. So when you exercise, you need to eat protein soon after the workout in order to build muscle. Let's look at that, post-exercise. So I've just said that what's really important is hydration. And it cracks me up because all the fitness programs that I help to sponsor and help to work in, what do they give athletes? Pickle juice. Have you ever heard of that? Pickle juice to help cramping muscles, to help after a work. It's like, that is so ridiculous. And probably just a mindset makes some people feel like, oh, it really helped. There's really no science around how pickle juice can help a cramping muscle. What happens is they're probably dehydrated. Now, it is possible that they completely ran out of blood sugar and their liver says, sorry, I can't make it fast enough. And you have a fuel breakdown that can certainly make the muscle cramp. But usually it's hydration. So post-exercise, we probably don't need amino acids that would, like I mentioned, go back into the liver and have to give us new sugars, because that takes a while. We also know that if we exercise really hard, we do break down some muscle. So what do you think about that? When does muscle rebuild happen, do you think? Right after the workout? Bing! Yes. When we're sleeping, yes. So it's not critical to eat protein right after a workout. Now, fitness centers love for you to do that because what are they doing? They're selling you a protein shake. Now, a lot of people do feel better after their protein shake. Why do you think that is? Yes, and they usually have some kind of sugar in there. And also, this is really important, when we feel like we have done a workout, what do we want? Good job. And so we kind of reward ourselves with a protein shake because it tastes good. It's kind of like a milkshake.
Oh, not me. I want a gooey sweet.
Yay!
I love sugar.
Yes.
Me, I want something sugar, like good sweet.
Yes.
On that one.
There you go. There you go. Well, and Rachel, I love that point. We kind of get into we have like Pavlov's dogs. We do something and it makes us think of something else. And you work out and you want your sweet treat. And if, somebody's told you a protein shake's important, that might be what first comes to your mind. But what's important is, what do our bodies really need? Well, Rachel, you're probably not far off, because post-exercise, we've burned some blood sugar probably. We've probably burned some fat. We've probably done something to the liver to make the liver know that fuel is declining because it's going into the muscle. So we definitely are probably needing some carbohydrates. In fact, there was a cool study. This was probably in the early 2000s, maybe 2005. Optimize in 45. And this was so great for chocolate milk. Chocolate milk had a huge burst of business because the athletes, or the people that follow this stuff, hear that optimize in 45 means that you need a perfect ratio of protein and carbs right after your workout. In fact, it's not this high protein thing. It's actually 1 protein to 4 carbs. And even after all this became popular, people still said, go get your protein shake. And by the way, it's made with non-nutritive sweetener, so it wasn't anywhere close to having high carbs, right? But this whole research arm talked about, wow, after a hard workout, we need to replenish those sugars. And so chocolate milk happened to be the perfect ratio. And so it's funny how we could see products come out. Advertising, again, this is for the fitness world, but it always bleeds into the public. So chocolate milk took a big jump in sales after the research that was optimized in 45. And that just meant that after 45 minutes, or between, minute 1 after your workout all the way to 45 minutes, you have this window of opportunity to absorb these nutrients and rebuild and replenish your body. So I thought it was really interesting. And you're absolutely right that muscle rebuild, when we really do need amino acids, does not happen right after exercise. We've got a little swelling that happens right after exercise because you've got fluids and you've got sugars happening. But rebuild happens probably the next day. Maybe at night, but definitely the next day. So yeah, for sure, to answer the question is, no, we don't need protein right after. We need hydration, which is really key. And we probably need some sugar. Now, let's talk a little bit about that. Do we want to just throw down some cinnamon rolls? Unless they're...
I'd probably get some Ezekiel bread and peanut butter or something.
There you go, sure. Well, so this really helps us understand what we want to feed our bodies after a workout and what nutrients do we want it to come along with, you know? And again, this is why when I used to run training teams, it bothered me that we would feed athletes at the race end so much junk. Not to mention the pickle juice. What else would you see? Like if you did a walk and the race end had a bunch of food.
Well, sometimes they hand out bananas.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Now, bananas, would that be considered a sugar? Yeah, it would. So we know we want to replenish sugar. And we know we could have a little bit of protein. So again, we're going to say sugars is the same thing as carbs and protein and hydration. We know that's the most important thing. Those three components, but for sure hydration. So yeah, fruit is pretty good. Fruit is mainly fructose, and so it doesn't give you a lot of staying power. It might be enough for the first 10 or 15 minutes, but you're going to need something again pretty quickly. What would be some other good examples to get these carbs, and even if it could come along with a little bit of protein, and not to mention some hydration too? What would be some foods you could think of, like the Ezekiel bread and peanut butter? What would be some other foods that you think you could use that would be a good post-workout? And there really isn't a right or wrong answer here. I'd love to hear what you think. Something that has some complexity to it, because anytime we have a carbohydrate that's complex, what's automatically in there? Fiber. And when you have fiber, you have hydration. And when you have complex, you also have protein. So there you have it. That makes it cool. So that's why I wasn't so happy with the Little Debbie's and the, golly, I mean, like hot dogs and barbecue. And I mean, I've done so many triathlons, and at the race end would be the horrible food. And so it's sometimes so simple that we bypass it. But like an oatmeal cookie. When I made the Parker bars, same idea as an oatmeal cookie. It had some oats. It had, for the complexity, which is the fiber and the protein. It had some nuts, so we got a little bit of protein and even a little staying power with the fats. And it was made with some fruit. And it had lots of electrolytes with the dried plums. So finding a food like an oatmeal cookie is one that's going to really help get you a little bit of sweet, because it's going to have some sugar in it, so it'll fill that craving, and it'll help to bring the blood sugar back up. It'll turn down the gluconeogenesis. So it's okay, liver, just be chilled. We're putting some food in, and then you'll have enough of the protein to be able to rebuild the muscles when your body has now reacclimated after the activity. So some of the other foods I like, I said oatmeal cookie. I think Ezekiel bread is awesome. I would even go so far as to say, how about Ezekiel bread or toast with jam? That's my favorite, because now I got a little simple sugar. I got some protein and fiber in there. I think fruit is okay, but it just leaves me hanging, because the fructose is so high that the glucose is not quite enough. So I would say fruit plus something else. Yeah. Peanut butter, pretzels. Sure. In fact, one of the marathons that I went on, we were out in the Grand Canyon, the little Grand Canyon, and I think it was on mile 12. They had trail mix, so a bunch of nuts. And the only problem is I had to like stop and get it out of my teeth, and that was hard. So, but the goos, oh goodness, no. The goos and all those funny little sugar things actually take away hydration because it's so concentrated. So nuts might work for some, and then nut butters, like we said up here with the peanut butter. Nut butters could be good. Some of the ultra endurance athletes that I worked with love to bring potatoes because it was some fiber, some amino acids, and really simple to eat. It could eat the potato and drink your water and nothing left in your teeth. So there you have it. I hope that's helped to answer some of these fact or fiction questions. And I sure appreciate you guys hanging out with me today for some nutrition during fitness.
I don't know if there's a quick answer for this, but the reason I said muscle rebuilds at night is because my Fitbit, the details in the app say that during deep sleep is when your muscles rebuild.
Totally.
Something about the next day, so I'm just kind of wondering. I don't know if there's a quick answer for that.
Well, it's a continuum. So it technically takes like between 8 and 14 hours for your muscle recovery to end. So if that helps. And it just depends on some people. I mean, some people have really fast recovery, and they're the athletes that can jump right back in. And on the little Grand Canyon that I did, we were taking this long bus ride, and there was a guy on the bus that was going to do another marathon the very next day. And I thought, okay, you are just crazy. But he must have had such a fast recovery time, and he was working so far below his sweet spot, it was easy for him that he didn't have a need for a lot of recovery. Yeah, great point though. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. And what I really hope is this gives you inspiration to listen to your body, exercise in a way that feels great. A little push here and there is fine, but don't feel like you have to do a high intensity exercise bout in order to burn fat or to get the benefits from exercise.